Hello guys, today I have a special review for you. We will take a look and try out the new Mobios 2.0 airbrush from Gaahleri. I would like to thank Gaahleri for providing this airbrush free of charge. This review reflects my own personal opinion and we will discuss both the pros and cons of this tool. We begin with a cardboard box, and inside that box is yet another box. And inside that box we have some basic instructions on how to use and clean the airbrush. And then we have the airbrush itself here, securely stored in this little cushioned box. Let's take it out and take a closer look. The airbrush has a nice weight in your hand and does not feel cheap. Just from the visuals it looks really nice, but what's inside is important. When you unscrew the back part, you get access to the needle. The needle itself is very simple and does not feature anything special other than being very thin, because this airbrush has a nozzle with a diameter of 2.5 mm. If you unscrew the front cap, you will see the nozzle. However, I actually had some trouble unscrewing this the first time, as it's quite tight. And unfortunately you can't use a small wrench here, so I had to carefully help out with some pliers. Only necessary the first time, but still a bit awkward. But once the cap is off, you can see the fine nozzle. And I am very glad that Gaahleri opted for a nozzle without a screw thread. Since the nozzle can simply be inserted into the tip, there is one less area that can break off or get damaged. I used to have this problem more often with cheaper airbrushes. There's also a small air valve at the front, below the paint cup. This allows you to quickly adjust the air pressure on the airbrush itself without having to change your compressor. At least that's how it works in theory. Let's take a look how the airbrush works during normal use and then go into its functions in more detail. First, we need to connect it to the air hose. For this, we've already screwed on a quick release adapter. If you have a hose without a quick release, you can simply unscrew the adapter. I had a few problems with this adapter though, because it wouldn't click properly. With my other airbrushes, I can hear a distinct click and then the hose is secure. Here the clicking is much quieter and the hose isn't always properly secured and can sometimes be pulled off again. The quick release adapter might need to be replaced to solve this problem. Or you might need to use a Gaahleri brand equivalent. Okay, now we finally connected the airbrush and can start painting. I will be using an acrylic paint from Vallejo Air series, mixing it with the appropriate Vallejo thinner and floor improver to a suitable consistency. Since this airbrush is very fine, I'll also mix my paint very thinly. Before I fill the cup with paint, I drop some flow improver into the airbrush and spray once to lubricate the needle. As expected, the airbrush has worked like any other so far. However, even under these conditions, the lines are smaller than usual and it would work well for a simple freehand camouflage pattern. The main trigger feels good on the finger and doesn't slip. Pressing the trigger in also works without any problems. Both airflow and paint flow are well controlled and the spray is even. Now let's take a look at the small knob at the bottom. If we turn this in, we can reduce the air pressure on the airbrush itself without having to fiddle with the compressor. And because air pressure is particularly important for fine airbrush work, this is a very nice extra. I will turn the knob in about halfway and test how fine the lines will be. Remember, I'm not an airbrush professional. This is a test how well you can handle an airbrush as a beginner. And I have to say, I'm quite amazed how thin my lines can be now. With this airbrush, a mottled camouflage like on Luftwaffe aircraft would definitely work well. My attempt at painting the small panels on this test model worked quite well. Of course, you will always get soft edges with an airbrush, but with this airbrush they are very narrow, and with enough skill you can probably skip masking the model and simply paint the camouflage freehand on occasion. I didn't film the cleaning process as it's generally a bit more complicated, but everything went smoothly and I was able to disassemble, clean and reassemble the airbrush without any problems following the included instructions. However, I noticed something about the main lever that should be adjusted. If you pull the lever all the way back, you get the most color. With the factory settings, you can pull the lever back a little further, but doing so causes it to slide upward, which immediately stops the airflow. Therefore, you should screw in the fluid adjustment knob until it stops the main lever before it slides too far. Then there is no sudden stopping of the airflow. Another minor issue that concerns me personally is the airflow button on the underside, which prevents me from placing the airbrush on the cleaning pot. However, this is less a problem with the airbrush itself than with the design of the pot. Still, it might be something to consider for some people. Overall, I'm satisfied with the airbrush's performance and have a very good first impression. Of course, it will take a lot more time to form a long-term opinion. If you'd like a quick update on my opinion in a few months after extended use, please let me know in the comments. It's nice that the features are good, but it's also important to consider the price. At the time of this writing, the airbrush costs between 70 and 90 euro. With my coupon code DREAMSCALEMODELING, you can get an additional 10% discount in the official Gaahleri shop. And now we come to the conclusion. Based on its performance alone, I am very satisfied so far. The airbrush feels high quality and its assembly is easy to understand. The spray pattern is thin and cleaning was also straightforward. But it's always important to consider the associated price. At around 80 euro, the airbrush definitely is in the upper mid-range. But if you want an airbrush with a thin 0.2mm needle and you don't want to deal with the error-prone screw-on nozzles, this might be the right choice. This airbrush isn't for beginners. But that's only because the nozzle is too small for beginners and the airbrush is really only designed for detail work. Painting an entire 1:35 scale model with this would take far too long. Therefore, I can recommend this airbrush to anyone who is already comfortable with an inexpensive airbrush with, let's say, a 0.5mm needle and no wants an additional airbrush for details. I will use it in future models and I am very happy to have added another useful tool to my workbench. If you have any questions or feedback, please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe to never miss any future uploads. Thank you all for watching and see you next time.